Good evening. Good evening. I'd like to first off say welcome to Panther and Cage, everyone. This is Panther and Cage Freestyle X Part 2, the second part of a discussion or response, I should say, to a long discussion that we had a long time ago. And we are aimed to cover all the details regarding that response. So anyway, welcome to Freestyle X2. I'm your host tonight, Panther, as you can see. Panther and Cage is intended to be a weekly live stream where we speak from a Afrocentric perspective on a variety of topics. However, we've been covering a lot to do with race in America, which we just so happen to understand a little bit about. So we here on this platform, we encourage the community, which is the viewing audience, to use your comments to provide a real-time feedback within this live stream. So you are welcome to make comments. Those comments do contribute to progressive and relevant discussions. And they also will reveal tangible solutions. Eventually, they actually do. And what it will do is, in course, it will also correct those gatekeepers who oppose unity and equity and equality. So again, our focus here on Panther and Cage is to expose those negative narratives that are floating around the Brevard County community and others that reveal the needs for these calls to action to terminate, any perpetuation of social and cultural bigotry, and also to temper the racially hostile environments that suffocate the gullible members of our society. Now, if this is your first time joining us, I hope that you enjoy. Hope that you enjoy it. Trying a new format, so give me a moment. Yeah, I'm gonna have to stretch this screen over here for it to be a little. All right, there we go. Okay. Now, last week, or not last week, but the last stream, the last time we streamed, we used the opportunity to finally respond to a Brevard County community member who boldly decided to tell us or offer his version of what would be a tangible solution. And we'll discuss that in detail in a moment. But he boldly decided to tell us that we, as the host of this platform, we were less about educating our community, and that we spread anger and that we promote Black supremacist views. So I gave that person a chance to elaborate on what specifically corroborates his dissident claims, that we promote Black supremacist views. Because obviously, usually when someone says that, that means that they are lacking and not understanding what exactly is the situation or the status of race relations in America today. Now, one of the things that I do want to express, sorry, you see that there? That's the top of my computer. But one of the things I wanted to express was that, didn't mean to plug that, was that calling out, this method of inserting himself in a Black space, and using his what is defined as white privilege to challenge the legitimacy of the Black community celebration of Juneteenth. I used, Michael Newman's experience at Howard, and that's what you see here to my left, the review, the white student that sues the HBCU. So I used his name was Michael Newman. I used his experience at Howard University School of Law to educate on the hypocrisy that this community member of mine, my community, decided to try to utilize. Now, using that, using a video that was created by Dixie Whitey, I addressed somehow, how some people like to gaslight others into regarding the discussions and debates dealing with racism. And then I talked about that gaslighting being used to further miseducate and misdirect attention from the critical social matters that need to be explored. And then I talked about that gaslighting being very, very familiar with a very familiar method when we, see people using all these preconceived concepts and these narratives to just answer some of the social issues and deal with the social problems that are currently on the table. Now, for example, in dealing with correcting the amount of Black history that should be taught in schools, there's a movement right now to categorize all Black history as CRT, or what would be defined as critical race theory. And we will define what critical race theory is a little bit later. But, this movement is to miseducate the public on the public's ability to be able to be socially aware or socially educated on the current status of our society. Now, that movement is focused on using euphemisms to miseducate the public. And that movement is also slapping a label on the different movements, and they're labeling it a complete whole entity, which is completely irresponsible and it's dismissive. Now, the Black empowerment movement is labeled as a woke movement, and that is problematic within itself. So it's problematic because woke can't really be defined by the same people who are against it. And I got an example here. I think I made a note here that talked about, you wouldn't allow a Nazi, and this is the reason why it's a note, because they don't like these words, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. You wouldn't allow a Nazi to dictate how the Holocaust is taught. I mean, pretty much we understand that. That's clear, right? So when someone doesn't understand the movement or doesn't understand what the terms are, what is being socially aware, why would we let them dictate and tell us exactly what it is? You have to first educate us on it, which is why we do go back to a lot of history on this show. But I just thought that it should be taboo, that it shouldn't be taboo to be socially aware. And I know that the most important principle of the art of war is to know your enemy. So if someone is actually trying to, well, I won't get into that right now. That's a little off. I don't want to go on a tangent. Now, I revealed some messages that I received from day to day regarding the community's awareness, regarding the social cultural bigotry. And I gave 12 examples of the white Americans' dependency upon the US legislation to resolve their problems. All right. Now, giving those examples, I not only discredited that narrative that America's Black community relies too much on the government to solve our problems, but I also brought focus to how much more in-depth the issue really is. And that was in regarding to, there's a fine balance that lies between capitalism and socialism. Now, there was much more of when I addressed it, it was much more of a macro concept regarding the American society and the preference that the majority of Americans unconsciously choose. Right. I said that the conscious. I said unconscious because when you really think about it, capitalism is what is promoted until there is an emergency. And once there's an emergency or a problem that seems to affect Americans collectively, then it's this quiet advocacy of socialism that's not it's not only just expected, but it's quietly used until the problem is resolved. And that's a discussion that I'm sure that eventually we would like to actually have. That would be an aspect where we move away from race specifically, but actually talk about what system is preferred. Because I know there's an issue with capitalism, then there's an issue with socialism, but in ways, like I said, when there's an emergency, as a hurricane hit here in Florida or whatever, and then we expect this form of socialism or close to even communism. I won't really say communism, but it's close to it because there are so many people who depend upon FEMA, depend upon the government. So that's a discussion that we can have in the future. Anybody, you've been in my inbox this week, and everybody's been talking about my energy and how it's low. I apologize for that. I'm actually working. I'm in my work clothes right now. I'm actually been working a lot. There's just been a crazy schedule, and I have to deal with that with some other things. But people were in my inbox about my energy. So what I want them to do also is stay in the same inbox about that conversation, about the conversation whether we prefer capitalism over socialism and the reasons why. And if we actually bring this onto this platform, then we can have some participants that actually get in here and actually try to convey their points. I have no problem with you conveying your point and being responsible about it. It's the irresponsible comments or the trolling and sleight of hand in conversations, being disingenuous. That's what really gets me kind of animated, I guess you want to say. So on the other hand, in an effort to be diverse in thought, I briefly covered certain ideologies associated with the Black empowerment leaders of the past. And I talked about leaders like Marcus Garvey, Huey P. Newton, Bobby Seale, and the organization that they formed through the Black Panthers, and specifically the Black Panther political party. Right now, I talked about their efforts and their ideologies to even show that this line of thinking has historical footprints where some of the Black leadership broke ground and tried to establish advocacy for self-dependency. So I was trying to use that to be able to show that, that not all of the Black community has depended upon the government and solely, exclusively depended upon the government to solve their problems, but that there were individuals who did advocate for self-dependency, and we tried to establish or break ground or a foothold on into that direction. Okay, but we know what happened with that. So moving on, we just have to understand that that kind of behavior. Whether it be participating in a political entity as a separatist movement, as some of them were advocating, it was still deemed demonic by the American social class, and it was thwarted by the U.S. government. Now, there's a lot of school of thought involved with that, and you can't go on and you can't have a progressive conversation without understanding that, and that was the importance of me bringing that up. Back on the sugar fast, it sucks. So I have to drink water, excuse me. I rounded out that live stream by acknowledging 7 meaningful outcomes that have been the result of the peaceful protest in 2020, because that was one of the challenges that, Mr. Link Price said. All of the outcomes that legitimize the reasoning for having the protest in the first place. I reviewed outcomes that revealed that we still needed to apply critical thinking in a way that will produce tangible and equitable solutions for our communities. And it could be for both communities. I'm just, when I say our communities, I'm talking about the whole community, but specifically, I'm going to address where the needs are needed the greatest. And I feel that it's my Black community, okay, especially understanding how this platform was launched. Now, as I said, tangible and equitable solutions for our communities. and trying to get them to bask in the ideals of American equity and American equality. Okay, now we know when I say American equity, it's kind of why I just hesitated. We're going to have to redefine what that actually means, or ask someone what it means, because oftentimes they'll say there's American equity and there's American equality, but when we actually see the evidence of, there's a huge lack of evidence. Okay, so all of those are tough subjects to discuss openly in any public forum. And you have, if you haven't educated yourself on how the world is working, instead of the diluted aspects of what is defined as American exceptionalism, this is where it gets, it gets tough. It just gets odd. Okay. And that's where we have a problem in our country today. So tonight, we're going to continue completing this response. It'll be the finality of this response, I hope. And we're going to respond to the claims that he made, that Link Price made. Now, I'm going to pick right up where I left off regarding gaslighting, and or gaslighting that's consistently used to impede critical thinking, and the conversations that may manifest as a result of that critical thinking. So here's an example of a political advocate by the name of Hannah Cox, who touches on that specific method. Okay.
Is America a systemically racist country? 100% yes. And I never understand when the right balks at this. We tell you that the government is corrupt, that it is evil. Why do we try to push back when people say it's racist? We had institutionalized slavery in this country, followed by Jim Crow, that entrenched laws upon laws upon laws. Does that mean everybody working in our government is currently racist? No. Does that mean we still have laws on the books that were put there with racist intent or that have racially disproportionate outcomes? 100% yes. Look at the public school system, where we have redlining that determined where people live based on their zip codes and their skin color for decades. And that now determines how much money goes to their public schools. And this is why you see Black kids trapped in cycles of poverty in our government schools for decades and decades and decades. That's why we need school choice. These arguments support our policies that we're pushing for, because we actually want to see all communities lifted up. Look at the criminal justice system. You have 95 million traffic stops that were looked at between 2011 and 2018 across 56 different police agencies. And they found that Black people were more than 2 times likely to be pulled over. That disparity lessened at night when cops couldn't see them. They were more likely to be searched than white people, more likely to be caught with drugs, even though white people do drugs at similar levels. Black men are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police. They're 3.5 times more likely to be arrested for pot, despite both races using those drugs at similar rates. They get 20% longer sentences for the same crimes. When we look at this is a 2017 U.S. Sentencing Commission. When it comes to gun crimes, gun laws were put into place to explicitly block Black people from being able to access their rights to self-defense in this country, and boy, do they still work to this day. Black people are far more likely to be charged with gun crimes. They are more likely to be arrested and sentenced for longer time periods when they are caught. As a whole, there are still so many areas across this country where we are continuing to see the government harm people of color at disproportionate rates. And what that should tell you is that we need to limit this freaking government out of people's ways and giving it the power to do this to people. That's the end game.
Now, I just posted a link to that video where you can go back and listen to what she said. And if you have any questions, you can get in the comments and go ahead and ask me, and I'll go ahead and put the information back up, where I'll go over exactly what she said, because I have what she says verbatim already down, because she covers a lot. But the point that I wanted to make here was that, that was Hannah Cox, a libertarian conservative activist, and that she's seen there agreeing that America has a problem with systemic racism. Now, her speech specifically is pointing out the gaslighting hypocrisy about how most conservatives do not trust the government. That's a fact. I've had discussions myself, which is why they advocate for the government only taking a limited role in the lives of its citizens. Yet Hannah there pointed out that she doesn't understand why those same people push back on that concept when people point out or bring attention to racism that is existing in a systemic way within that same government. I understand it because it shouldn't sound familiar, but this very old thought of I personally observed it back in the 1980s. Okay, now Hannah gave a very generalized example of systemic racism. She gave several, but she made clear reference to, or she made relevance, I should say, clear by giving reasoning and the results of those examples of systemic racism. Now, she stated out that policies that she was advocating for were supported by each argument that was laid out in that video. And she got a little deep there when she brought the controversial statistics associated with the criminal justice system. Those can always be debated. And in fact, my co-host stated the very same statistics during our racial profiling series we did about a year ago. So you see it right there. There is the reason why we just jumped off with that, because there's an example of how conservatives can come full circle. Okay, they will say that racism doesn't exist and the government's not out to get us and that we should trust the government, but yet then they hypocritically say that government should only take a limited role. And I just had a discussion last night in the last stream, and I said that we all should have an unhealthy or a very healthy, I don't know why I keep saying unhealthy, but a very healthy not fear of the government, but a very healthy skepticism towards the government and some of its roles, because it's a system, and it's a system that's supposed to play out with different parties. And right now it's like commandeered or hijacked to two parties that are simply just playing controlled opposition. And so we're guided along a path, and we got two pilots, and every now and then it's the pilot and then it's the co-pilot, whichever party you believe. And then how we live our lives or how we pass laws to help us live our lives is basically dictated by, the roles that, each other that they play. But when we're on the same plane, the same, a plane, the plane has a wing on the left and a wing on the right. Doesn't matter if the co-pilot or the pilot's flying. I'm pretty sure they're flying us to the same destination. Maybe take a different route. Each one will have their own different route. Each one may want to fly at their own different altitudes, but we're going to the same destination. Right now, the only thing that we believe should remain unfamiliar here on Panther, for our Panther and Cage viewing audience, is the concept of legislators placing gun laws into effect that block African Americans from being able to access and utilize their rights to self-defense here in America. Now, that's a very controversial topic. Okay, she stated that. Okay, that's what she stated. I agree with her. We can have that debate on another time. We will discuss that when we talk about the Second Amendment and the reason for it, existing. So there, I just gave you a head start on something else that, maybe we may do further on down the road. I may take a hiatus after this, but, like I said, that part from our event, Panther and Cage viewing audience, that should be unfamiliar to you because we have not covered that yet. But I do agree with her that there are legislators placing gun laws in effect that will block African Americans from being able to access and utilize their rights to self-defense here in America. Okay. But we're slowly getting to that conversation. Okay. So I wanted to explore that together and further examine all the origins of the Second Amendment and how we have to have that very candid conversation. But that video was intended to just get us back on track regarding the hypocrisies that a certain segment of American society expects to put upon the foundational Black Americans. Okay, it's foundational Black Americans. If you don't know what foundational Black Americans are, I would suggest you look that up. I'm not going to explain that to you. It's pretty clear. Okay, now getting back to Hannah, her LinkedIn profile, she adds a caption to that video saying that she never understood why the hypocrisy existed. So she added that, she in the same way does not understand how the Democratic left wants to make the government bigger with that limited role of government concept in mind. She says, and I quote, hypocrisy all around. Okay. It appears that Hannah didn't get the memo. Okay. So that's just, I'm guessing that. Okay. But that's the same hypocrisy that the former Howard University law student, let me get it back on the screen here. I can. Now, like I said, that's the same hypocrisy that the former university law student Michael Newman he used to agitate the student body before he made claims of reverse racism. Okay. Now, I already placed a link for the comments about the video with Hannah in the comment section for those who just want to explore that, verify that content that I'm referencing. Because I know a lot of times when I say stuff, some people find that very hard to believe, and then I have to provide the evidence and the proof or do it for you. You can do the research yourself and you can present it. That is why we are here. So if you would like to present that information, get in the comment section, share it. A lot of times people don't want to do that because they know that we, have a lot of information here on this platform. Now I tried to make the overall hypocrisy point about the white, about white people insensitively engaging Black people in Black spaces and not getting the reaction that they desire. And I had a few people talk to me about this after I streamed. And it seems that, and this was a couple weeks ago, but it seems that those people didn't understand why I'm not, they don't understand why I'm not obligated to be nice to white people who make intentional microaggressive comments to Black American people existing within a Black space. Now, remember, it is a response to a set tone, okay? A response to a set tone, which I personally find funny because when those same people make those microaggressive comments to me, some of the same people who want to criticize my method of responding or my method of delivery of my response, they're not helping defend Black African American humanity. Okay? They're not dismantling that portion of discriminatory racism in America. And I want you, the viewing audience, to think about that. Make sure you keep that in mind and understand that that there's an example of why there are some people within the Black African American community. Okay, I could say African American community, but I'm going to say Black African American, covering all bases. But there are some people. This is the reason there are some people in that Black African American population in America that do not believe in having allies. They don't believe it's possible in having allies. Okay. I'm sure you've heard that phrase, you can't piss on me and then tell me that it's just raining, okay? I gotta find this specific one because I want you to see this, okay? Now, this was from the last stream, okay? Now, these comments are the comments that, that he made where he basically minimized, or Mr. Link Price minimized our ability to be able to have the conversation in the Black space about Juneteenth. He wanted us to talk more about May 20th, Florida's Emancipation Day. Okay. So he challenged the Black community on the legitimacy of them celebrating Juneteenth. As I said last stream, he clearly expressed that the Black community should not be celebrating Juneteenth and that we should be celebrating the ratification of the 13th Amendment, which was the date of December 6th, 1865. Not celebrating one of the other dates, in history that signifies the freedom of slavery. Let me go ahead and see if I can get that on the screen. I want to be able to get the right. It's a little premature, but I'm going to put it on the screen, and I'm actually going to make it large enough for you to be able to see this. Okay, so we know that there are dates. Okay, not celebrating one of the other dates in history that signifies freedom. Okay, freedom from slavery. Now, I thought that this was microaggressively, sweet, and that it just was just dipped in honey, all rolled up and waiting, for us as contributions on this platform. But you can see there, after numerous comments were made as a contribution, I suppose that Mr. Price accused me of not even mentioning Florida's Emancipation Day instead of discussing Juneteenth as I had done. Okay. Now that night, I had acknowledged all of this now, and I acknowledged that there was controversy regarding the accuracy of the emancipation of slaves. I simply brought attention to the issue because we were more focused that night on exploring the details of the Tulsa Race Massacre. And not that one event was more significant than the other, but the Tulsa Race Massacre retained more of a priority that night because the nature of the conversation that drove us to talk about it. You know, you see, we understand that he seemed to have missed our original audience, which the original audience they don't watch anymore because they found out that we brought the receipts. Okay, they wanted so desperately to have a conversation on black on black crime, and we had to have a discussion to set the stage. Now, here you can see, Mr. Price, that I don't really cherry pick the conversations as you claimed. You accused me of doing that, but the conversations that we have on this platform, they are relevant. All right. You would understand that since the inception of this platform, that we're facilitating the black on black crime debate with critical understanding of how the black community became the black community, and then how the white community, which was dubbed the white community, how it became the white community in the terms of demographic locations. Now, if you really paid attention, Mr. Link Price, you would have seen that years ago when we discussed the migration patterns that were set in America and how America had developed those cities. All right. Because that migration was important. All right. Let me get this off the screen so you can see my face, because I want you to. When we were talking about how the demographic shift, how it happened from the southern part of America to the northern part, or and parts in between, when we're talking about that demographic shift and how it came about, we talked about the mobility desired by Black African Americans when Route 66 opened up. Specifically, we talked about that, and we discussed that, how that brought about the necessity for Victor Green's Green Book. And those of you who have watched this platform in the past know that we covered the Green Book. That was like very early too. And I was actually discussing on a different platform, but it was actually made to set up with this platform. So anyway, we talked about that. We did it to accurately discuss how Black African Americans in America had to be extremely cautious when they were selecting lodging, and they had to watch out for danger on the roads when traveling. And we talked about sundown towns. We talked about vigilante justice. We talked about housing discrimination. We talked about lynchings, and we talked about lynchings in a very tough 2-part gut wrenching episode. Okay, now all of that was just to diligently lay out the groundwork for a semi-intellectual conversation, that wouldn't be offensive. And so no, we don't cherry pick. There's an actual path. And if you would stop, interfering with questions or whatever that the answers to, but you're just trying to be disingenuous, we can get there faster. Okay. So in facilitating the Black on Black crime discussion, we have to understand the shifting demographics and how America developed. And that was based on those demographic locations. That means that we've obviously developed a critical need to talk about the Durham, North Carolina. Okay, the massacre that happened in Durham, North Carolina. We got to talk about Tulsa, Oklahoma. Okay, we got to talk about Oscarville, Georgia. We got to talk about Seneca Village in New York. Okay, we need to talk about some of the massacres that happened in towns like Rosewood here in Florida. We got to talk about Slocum, Texas, Elaine, Arkansas. We can even talk about the Ocoee massacre here. Okay, because that Ocoee massacre had something to do with the Black population there, right next to in Orlando. Okay, and we've been trying to talk about all that stuff, but up until that point, that night, besides the Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, the only other massacre that we ever talked about, okay, was Ebenezer Creek. You remember that? I don't know if anybody remember that. Like 2 years ago, when we started all this, we talked about Ebenezer Creek. And the reason we talked about Ebenezer Creek was because of its relevance to the reparations discussion that initiated this platform. Okay. Now, I know that it would be absolutely vital to understand that America was shaped by the shifting demographics But we have to understand that some of those massacres and that some of the history of the inhumane acts and mistreatment of America's Black African American population shapes those demographic locations. If you think that I'm wrong about that at any point, Link, if you think that I'm wrong about that, please, anybody, anyone, get in the comment section and request to engage via guest and then tell me why I'm wrong, okay? I can send you a link. You can get on here. You can sit in your own little, your comfy couch or whatever, and you can, make your argument, okay? Now, I want you to try to explain to me, okay? I'm wishing someone would challenge me on this or whatever. I'm not even going to answer. It's just going to be real simple because you're going to make yourself look stupid. So I want someone to try to explain to me how a massacre of an entire town does not negatively impact where Black people will operate and reside today in America. Okay, let me say that again for you because I know Dr. Umar like to say it 2 or 3 times because some people really don't get it. So this is for the people in the back. All right. I want someone to just try to explain to me how a massacre of an entire town of Black people does not negatively impact where Black people would operate and reside in America today. Just checking the comments. I know I have 2 in a message. Yes, all the recordings are still up. They are still up. I put them on the page. You can go to the Panther and Cage page and just hit search and you'll find it. One of the things that I'm going to have to do soon is I'm going to have to save space for storage. I'm going to have to delete it off of the page to get it out of the database. And then I have to I have it already recorded, so I'll re-upload it. And I haven't done that yet, but I'm choosing to do that when they become relevant. When people we're having this discussion now about that, but when it becomes relevant, I'll be able to post that again. And then that way the video is shareable. I don't try to make these videos 2 hours long. They just go that way because there's a lot of information that we try to share. I would like to get it down to 45 minutes, but oftentimes we get individuals, like I said, that go to try to troll. And let me try something. I know that I think that there was a video that I would like to show you. I don't know if I have it. Let's see if I can just check that right now. So bear with me just one moment, everybody. I know I have it. I just don't want to waste too much time to. I think this may be it. And this is a video that is going to talk about the significance of Juneteenth. Okay. Keep in mind too, ladies and gentlemen, for all my African Americans or whatever, this is for you too. I am not explaining to just solely white people. This is for you individuals also when you are in need of discussing or having these discussions when they come up. There are a lot of people who intend for you to just cower down and for them to dominate the conversation. But you can't let these individuals who are holding implicit bias or just outright racist people, whatever, control the conversation. So when we cover these issues, they're not in totality. There are some things that you probably can add to. Please do. That is a point. This is actually just, a kind of forum so that we can actually have a discussion collectively. And then the answers that, come out of it, you can utilize yourselves too. In the process, I do try to make examples of some people who are disingenuous. But yes, this information is for you additionally.
These are the big 3 in the history of freedom of our enslaved ancestors. The Emancipation Proclamation, signed on January 1st, 1863, Juneteenth, June 19th, 1865, and then finally the ratification of the 13th Amendment on December 6, 1865, which is what finally and ultimately abolished the institution of slavery.
Gates says there is also a bit of fiction around that day in 1865 when Gordon Granger issued General Order Number 3 to free the enslaved black people of Galveston, Texas, 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation.
Well, we were raised to think that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, right? The problem is that the Emancipation Proclamation in and of itself didn't have the power to free anybody. It only applied to enslaved people in the Confederacy, and it can only be enforced if Union troops had captured territory in the South, in the Confederacy. Only about 500,000 enslaved men and women, we think, actually got their freedom from the Emancipation Proclamation. And James, there were 3.9 million enslaved African Americans, so the overwhelming majority of our ancestors were not freed by the Emancipation Proclamation.
Professor Gates says the most important thing about Juneteenth is the era that came after.
The most radical thing that happened after the end of the Civil War for the rights of our enslaved ancestors were the ratification of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments and the Reconstruction Acts.
I'll let you give you time to read that, but you can see here that he states that Juneteenth isn't that major of an event. Link, it's clearly obvious that why Juneteenth isn't that major of an event to you. You further state that growing up in Florida, you were not at all upset with the events of Juneteenth. You said that they weren't, you're not upset that they weren't much more than a paragraph in the history book. So I want everybody to see this, that he acknowledges that Juneteenth is such a Texas-centric holiday, and that, identifies or acknowledges his bias, and it's because he was raised in Florida. And objectively, one can understand that. However, you go on to be insensitive when you state that there's no real reason for anyone else to celebrate. Now, I'm upset. You said I'm upset that my state doesn't celebrate its own Emancipation Day and that I didn't learn about it from my Florida schooling. Actually, Link, Florida does celebrate it, and they have been celebrating it, okay? You don't see it in mass because you're not going to see it covered in the media, but that's another issue dealing with disparities when it comes to African Americans. Our events are only going to get maybe a 2-minute clip, just as you just saw, okay? That was a 1 minute and 27 seconds. I think I shortened that down from 2 minutes and 7 seconds, okay? But that's all we get, okay? So it's not hitting the mainstream because of all your counter movements today that would dub this a part of the woke movement, and they probably would label it as CRT because anything associated with Black history is being euphemistically denied and even blackballed, and we had discussions about that a couple of years ago. All right, now I want to highlight a portion, but in this format I can't do it. But I want to highlight this portion, so I hope that you are following along at home. Sorry for having the screen on for too long, but I just need for you to see the depth of why I'm responding. Because this is where he challenges me of not talking about these Emancipation Day confliction issues in depth. Because I'm going to break it all down right now, right here, in front of your eyes, okay? Link says, I don't know how you can do a segment on May 20th or Juneteenth without mentioning December 6th and the 13th Amendment. Then he doubles down to reaffirm his accusation to my co-host that there was, where was the mention of that came from? He said, good. To see all of you, all you got from that was that, I assumed that you didn't know these things. And actually, Link, you do insinuate, an assumption, that we don't know this false correlation of significance between the concept of emancipation and the concept of the 13th Amendment. We're aware of this, and we understand this to be an erroneous correlation, okay? we also understand our history enough to not miseducate our viewing audience with misconceptions that, we've historically fought against. So we're not working backwards here, okay? So not only was Link not paying attention, everyone, to exactly what was said in the response to his initial accusation, but then he says that I misunderstood what he was trying to communicate. Okay, I knew exactly what you were trying to communicate, Link. Okay. I knew exactly what you were trying to trying to say, because I looked at it, I watched it, I understand these quite well. Now, you all can see that I just showed the viewing audience a part of what Link was trying to communicate, and he's trying to impose a direct correlation between the abolition of slavery and the 13th Amendment, which is his limited opinion. He feels that it makes the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution more significant than the already celebrated idea of Juneteenth or holiday of Juneteenth. Okay. Now, in doing that, rather, whether he realized it or not, some unaware African Americans may not realize it. They may not realize it or not, but you're slapping us in the face. Okay. And it's just like wearing blackface. All right. You grossly miss very important details that are absolutely critical in understanding the Black experience in America. It's hard to say that because I don't know if I should fault you for that. Okay. But when you're an educator and you come into a Black space as a white male, you're operating on a certain level of privilege. I would think that you would already understand this enough to say, I'm not going to be insensitive about my solution, my tangible solution to this issue. This is a problem. Okay. I agree with you about history and being accurate, but okay. Now the details that my co-host was trying to share with you, he tried to make you several times on several different, different occasions. And he was even feeding you hints in the thread. All right. But based on the insults and the frequency of assumptions, it was nauseously clear that you want to you just want to contradict our information. Okay. And you wanted to actually contradict our method of modern delivery. Okay. Now we confirmed that it was clear by the insults that you issued before you successfully found out, okay, that we indeed covered the Emancipation Day material. Okay. Because you claimed I didn't. But when we tried to show you the evidence of that, you pivot and you move the conversation's goalposts. Okay. We watched this. We had a discussion about this. In fact, I can show you exactly where I had to orient you in the appropriate direction because I sent you a link. Okay. And that's where this photo came from. You see it there? Wrong again, Link. Stop making assumptions. Okay. And then I told my co-host to inform you that we covered May 20th in our Black Wall Street episode. Okay. I'm going to delete that out of there because we all seen it. I don't think I need to show it again. But seeing as how you claim to be an educator here in Brevard County, you should be aware of those kind of mistakes, Link. But since you assume, I guess, I can assume it's elementary school that you teach. So you probably might not, want to re-engage with us here on this platform until you educate yourself beyond the limitations that you revealed in those responses. Okay. Now it may cost you your job. So I don't want to cost you your job. Okay. That's me being nice. Okay. But I shouldn't have to educate you on you of all people. But rest up because I'm going to put it to bed right now. All right. Because like I said, in the last live stream that I did, I know what I said because I was there when I said it. All right. So get ready to watch me cover the material that, that's in question, Link. Surrender of the Confederate governments in each of the rebellious states in order for the proclamation to take effect or had to be had, and it wasn't done. The article stated that it's similar history in every state, and that was every state of the illegitimate Confederate States of America.
if the date of emancipation was to be recognized. There's a Senate Bill 490, which is called Juneteenth Day, and it's designating Juneteenth Day as a legal holiday. And it's supposed to be enacted soon. I believe it said it was, if I read it right on the website, it was going to be effective as July this year. So we still understand that that's still incorrect. As a true history of our state, state Florida shows that, May the 20th, this past May the 20th, 10 days ago, that was the official Emancipation Day for Florida. All right. Now, Tallahassee fell to Union troops on May 20th, 1865. Thus, formerly enslaved people in Florida were emancipated on May the 20th. A full month before Granger arrived in Galveston. So, Florida's Black communities have celebrated May 20th as the Emancipation Day in Florida, and those celebrations have been documented for years. In actuality, that history shouldn't be erased. And that creating a sort of pseudo fake history and absorbing the tradition of another region is kind of doing Florida a disservice, and that's actually intellectually disingenuous. It's important for us to keep track of that kind of information. Some of the information that you would actually need to know are some of the things that we should be getting taught in public schools. Yes, public schools, not private, but public schools. Because these issues happen to come up every day.
Every day, those issues come up. Just like it came up with this, link. Now, clearly, you can hear that I said exactly what you were trying to infer, Link. I alluded to Juneteenth, the Emancipation Day being technically incorrect. And why? Okay. Almost a whole month prior, Union Army General Edward M. McCook arrived in Tallahassee on May 10th, 1865. So I'm saying it in more detail now, since you think that it's more significant, we'll see, okay? But 10 days later on May 20th, which I did state earlier, I didn't say who read it, but I'm going to say it now tonight. McCook read the Emancipation Proclamation declaring all slaves in Florida henceforth free. Minus that detail, though, I addressed the Juneteenth Emancipation Day, and I addressed it as pseudo history. And I even iterated that not only was that disingenuous, intellectually disingenuous, but it was doing Florida a disservice. Did you hear me? And you, Mr. Link Price, you claimed that I didn't even mention it. Now, Mr. Link Price, you didn't even listen, okay? What did I tell you last live stream about white men talking more than they, when they should be listening when it comes to Black history? Okay, so can you kind of see why I said that? Because you're prone to get it all wrong. Just like Michael Newman, the student who went to the HBCU at Howard University, right? You're prone to get it all wrong. And then you presumptuously suggested that I should have mentioned the ratification of the 13th Amendment as more important than any of the other issues that I was talking about on that night of May 30th, 2021. Now, you can clearly see, in addition to what I was saying, the caption below the picture of the book, when you saw that on the screen, you can clearly see that caption read that I was highlighting, which held the information. And it basically said, telling the true story of slavery is an important step in helping this nation come to grips with the truth about institutional racism. Institutional racism, Link. Institutional racism in schools, like via leaving out critically important information about our nation's history, same history that we were debating about. You don't want to have the incorrect information about George Washington's birthday, or how many died on 9/11. But you did, I will give you some credit, I think, because you did acknowledge the lack of accuracy in information. So I won't clown you too hard on that. But all that means is that you didn't have a legitimate gripe outside of you believing that the 13th Amendment is a more significant date of celebration than the Juneteenth holiday. So, I'm asking you another question. Can you see why I say that your comments were microaggressive, or do you need more evidence? Because if you do, I got you. I got you. Check it out, bro.
The Emancipation Proclamation was a presidential proclamation and an executive order that was issued by the United States President Abraham Lincoln on September the 22nd, 1862, during the Civil War. Now, I believe that's the actual date that he signed it. I'm pretty sure of that because that was the actual day that I signed my enlistment papers going into the United States Army. So those are significant dates that just happened to come up, and I remember. The President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. As the nation approached its third year in a bloody civil war, the proclamation declared that all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states, those were the Confederate States of America, they were henceforth shall be free. The General Order number 4 in Galveston on June the 19th, 1865. Now, everyone knows this, or most people know this as the date which is referred to as Juneteenth. Slavery did not end in the United States after this was even read. It was a mere acknowledgement that in accordance to Abraham Lincoln's executive order, which was effective on January 1st, 1863, the slaves being held in those states yet in the rebellion on that date would be considered free. No longer slaves at that date. That's actually accurate. There was no way to enforce the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, because the states in rebellion remained in rebellion. And that's a fact. The Confederacy fell when General Robert E. Lee surrendered to General Ulysses S. Grant on April 9th, 1865 at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia.
Sorry about that. Now, even though that may sound like a little bit of overkill, excuse me, even though that may sound like a little bit of overkill on the information, and at times it can seem even boring because of my tone. And I apologize for that, everybody. I'm sorry about that data and the way I delivered it. There's a lot of times we're just trying to cover this issue or cover these information and move to the next issue. But even though I apologize, that data can't be argued with. So even with all of that information that was stated during that really short clip, if you can think on it, you can actually comprehend what I'm saying, and that even though the order was signed and read to be effective as January the 1st, 1863, there was no way to enforce that executive order because there would have needed to be Union troops occupying Confederate spaces to stop them from rebelling. Okay. Trying to calm down and I'm Black Link. Okay. So that's one safe assumption. Me being Black and understanding that the Confederate battle flag is commonly called a rebel flag for a reason, because rebels rebel. I do understand that there had to be Union troops occupying those Confederate spaces because there are a lot of Confederate spaces when you go up in North Florida. Okay. The rebel flag is still flown today, other than over in Tampa at a museum called Cracker Country, which had the biggest flying Confederate flag, I think, in the state of Florida. Up in North Florida, there are people who still fly it today. Hell, I was on a JRTC. We went to Alexandria. Was that Virginia, I think? We were in Alexandria. And we were at Fort Polk. And just outside of Fort Polk, they're flying Confederate flags. They were flying Confederate flags as early as 2010, 2011. So I'm pretty sure they're still flying. All right. So I've been up and down the Eastern Seaboard, and I can tell you at different states, I have seen that flag flown. It's being flown in Georgia. Okay. Right now, it's being flown in Georgia in certain places. I'm not saying public places are still flying it, but I will say in public places, there are still Confederate monuments here in Florida. I know that I have actual evidence of that since 2019. Okay. But the point of me saying all that is, did you guys hear what was said in the clip? I know the audio was not the greatest. I apologize for that. I was at an earlier time. I didn't even have a mic at that point. I think my co-host actually got me a mic because we know the audio was always having issues. We always got reverberations going. We're trying to work on all those issues. But you could clearly hear me say that the states in rebellion remain in rebellion. And even though the executive order was read and it's supposed to be effective as of that date that it was read, we did explain that. You heard that. So the Confederate States of America, they made a conscious decision to continue to rebel and keep the freedmen in bonds of chattel slavery. And we understand this to be them to be defiant to the end. Okay. I mean, that's pretty obvious that they always held the mantra that the South shall rise again. That's another significant point. Okay. That I would let you know that despite me being Black, that I would understand that they had a mantra that they would say the South shall rise again. And in fact, I'm gonna get personal here. All right. I dated a girl whose brother-in-law had a Confederate battle flag flying in the front yard. Okay. He had a white flag. Beneath that Confederate battle flag, there was a white flag he had with a skull and crossbones on it. And it had a quote underneath that said, "The South shall rise again." All right. Now, somehow at that time, because of the nature of the visit and everything, whatever, when I was, walking up, to the driveway, or when I was parked the driveway and we got out of the car and we started walking, I did not pay much attention at that time. Okay. I was focused on somebody else. Okay. And while I was visiting, my brother, was with me. He was the one that pointed it out to me. He grabbed me by the shoulder and he was like, "Hold up, bro. Do you see that?" I saw it. It was the flag. It said, "The South shall rise again." That's a true story. Okay. Now, that was all said. Okay. So that that we agree that even though the General Order number 4 was read in Galveston, Texas on June 19th, 1865, I'm going to go ahead and make it big for you on the screen. So we know that General Order number 4 was read in Galveston on June 19th, 1865. All the states in rebellion intentionally remained in rebellion until the Union troops would enter those states and declare emancipation of those held in slavery. All that information right there to take care of everything, right? Okay, Link. But let me go ahead and show you something else, okay? Let me show you something else. All those who watch this show, who watch the stream, they understand this. They know that we covered this many times before. And this slide this photo looks very familiar. We've shown this thing a billion times, not really a billion times, but we showed it enough times, okay? And you had the nerve to not only acknowledge that it wasn't taught properly then, but that the way that I'm attempting to teach it isn't proper either. So for a moment, everybody, let us bow down and worship Mr. Link, Legend of Zelda. Link to The Price is Right, Mr. Keeper of all, how to educate us all Black African Americans on the ratification of the 13th Amendment and how it supersedes the significance of Juneteenth and any other day declared emancipation for Black Americans held in chattel slavery and oppressed for more than 400 years. Even though your massive ego, which I'm sure you're saying I have one, that's fine, because this is well deserved. But even though your massive ego, because remember you came into a Black space, it has pushed it's pushed your mind into what to what you believe is cognitive elevation, blessing you to be able to assess and then give us this gift of the 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution, that it should be the greatest day. That foundational Black Americans shouldn't celebrate December. They should celebrate December 6th like no other day, even though Mr. Link Price fails to understand that the 13th Amendment never abolished slavery, but that it only transformed slavery by legalizing it. And I know you know that now, because you recently made something, but we'll get to that, all right? But here is a hint why, okay, that it only transformed slavery. Here's a hint. There was something very significant about our history link, and I think that it had to do with the American cultural standards that normalized criminalization of Black and brown people, all right? But let us take, while you're watching this, I want you to get the whole totality of that, because while you're watching that, I want us to really take a methodical approach about how we discover this truth, so you really comprehend the depth of what lies beneath what you think is progress and anti-Black legislation. So it clearly reads, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to the jurisdiction. Now, since you wanted to be in the limelight so bad, to be the bringer of this wonderful solution that will yield tangible benefits, pushing my community, the Black community, towards American equity and, dare I say, equality. But have you never put your cognitive processes to the idea that I just cited could be the reason for casual and constant criminality that's handed down to innocent African-American citizens? It's a legitimate question, Link. That's a legitimate question. Have you ever put your cognitive processes to the idea that this concept of criminality being thrust upon melanated citizens, melanated citizens of America, is constantly done so that politically driven sycophants could find the quickest legitimate way to put us, Black African Americans, back in the chains? You ever thought about that? So tell me, Mr. Link Price, tell me in all of your great wisdom and privilege that you have thought about this simple amendment only meaning that slavery had been transformed into condition that was that was a very simple excuse which uses conviction to justify the immoral concept of human slavery. Tell me that you understood how this amendment missed at being the most popular amendment celebrated amongst African American communities nationwide. How being duly convicted permanently snatches away the privileges of voting, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. That was the most popular amendment. Do you understand why? Can you, because this is blaringly clear, and for some reason you're obtuse, and it can't just be because you're white, right? Because we're all equal, right? Your white skin shouldn't affect your, but then that's another discussion. That's another discussion. But I'm gonna help you out. The most favorite amendment, okay, for African Americans in America, for foundational Black African Americans, okay, is the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Even if there are some communities, separatist communities out there who don't agree with that, the fact is it's 100%, I'm sure about it. The most favorite amendment is the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And being duly convicted permanently snatches away those privileges. And it leaves you with the obligation of being taxed at on top of that, since conservatives love to talk money, right? Right? I'm not a worshiper of money, but conservatives love to talk about money. So not only does being duly convicted strip away the Voting Rights Act from African Americans, but it leaves them in a situation where they're being taxed. And then looking at the political landscape, we don't hold any right to representation. So help me, Link, help me understand, who was it that said taxation without representation is tyranny? Can you tell me? Can anybody, tell me? Was it Otis, the security guard, or Martin when he was protecting the ATM machine? Anybody remember that? Everybody remember that? When Otis, was in front of the machine? I got a picture of that, but I don't know if I should show it. I love Otis, the security guard. Otis was pretty clever, all right? I'm thinking about the wrong Otis. My bad. My bad, dog. I'm sorry. My bad. It wasn't Otis, the security guard from Martin. It was James Otis who wrote that, right? He wrote, taxation without representation is tyranny. And he did that in defense of the British colonists who were being unconstitutionally taxated through the Stamp Act. Now, I know you know about the Stamp Act, right? You don't know about the Stamp Act, Link? No, yeah, you do. You're an educator. You know about the Stamp Act. Oh, yeah. That Stamp Act. Yeah. Yeah. Aren't these the symbols of the same dark occultic entity that use a hidden oligarchy to levy fines and taxes upon the British people? Isn't this the same entity that forced the British people out of England? It forced them to leave England, and they ran on down to the Ivory Coast to steal a few prisoners of war. They legitimized the theft of that, by even forming through the London Virginia Company, a company that they formed so they can literally legitimately use black African prisoners of war. They then exploited those same prisoners of war and tried to reestablish a new world here in what would be called the Americas. Is it this what your ancestors did, Link? That didn't look familiar to you? You're a teacher, and I give you might be elementary school, but you came at us in a black space. You're supposed to know all of this. You are supposed to know all. This is why I'm speaking to you like this, because you're supposed to know this stuff, right? I bet you there's other content creators that know this that don't talk about this. I would love to hear Rubia Garcia say something about it. I would love to hear her talk about the Stamp Act, because she's really good at, she's a history buff. She's really good at history. And her having a white face, I'm sure she could say it, and then some people will listen, because you guys think I'm just making this stuff up, right? Because you said I'm just manufacturing this stuff, Link. Look it up. There's the information right there, the Stamp Act. All you do is Google it. A lot of information is going to come up, not the most important or pertinent information, but I can tell you there are books in the Brevard County Library that actually has that image, okay? It actually has that image, and it talks about, look, right down there, see? The Stamp Act. Just look at it. What does it say? Look at it, Link. It's a crying shame. I want you to understand that, everybody understand that the Europeans, okay, they ran from this very putrid, corrupted, occultic inspired entity, okay? And they did that. They ran from over there only to come over here and then become that same symbol of oppression for Black Americans. This is fact. Well, maybe, Link, maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe I went back too far. Okay, maybe I went back too far in saying, okay, so let me get that off real quick. I went a little too far. It wasn't James Otis, right? It wasn't James Otis who said that. Taxation without representation, right? It was the English philosopher John Locke who said it. He wrote that in England, that there can be no taxation without representation and no representation without election. Ooh, even deeper. We went back. Oh, ooh. I know you know who John Locke is, right? The guy who all the American philosophy college students consider when they, you know, talk about ethics and the social contract. Trevor Noah even talked about this man in the social contract. I totally forgot. I just remembered that. But see, I know it because I have some philosophy books about him and I got them in storage. All right. I mean, I can dig them out if you want me to. Okay. Okay. So since I, been asking you a lot of questions, I'm going to backtrack just for a moment to give you a graphic representation, okay, that I'm trying to insinuate. All right. So I'm going to make this large for you because I know you need to see this because you tend to not understand. I mean, you all up in a black space trying to tell me something about, why I should celebrate December 6th over Juneteenth. Remember when I just asked you, have you thought about the passing of the 13th Amendment only meant that slavery had been transformed into a condition that uses conviction as an excuse to justify the immoral concept of human slavery? Well, that's what it did, Link. Okay, I gave you the hint. You're not here right now, so I'm sure you're probably watching, but you won't make a comment, and that's cool. Like I said, I know you are involved in the school system, and you might not want to engage with me or whatnot, because you already know that it took a little over 2 years for the implementation of the Emancipation Proclamation to be enforced in the Confederate States. I know that you're aware of that because you mentioned it in a conversation thread, right? And then we established the fact that the enforcement of the Emancipation Proclamation only ended chattel slavery in those same rebellious Confederate states. And after that emancipation, never mind what a specific date about the year in 1865, of all the 3 dates that you saw earlier, Congress passed that 13th Amendment, and they passed that in January of 1865. And then it was ratified on December 6th of that year. Well, when when they went to discuss the amendment of the United States Constitution, what was not explained in depth is the conversation about what was actually on the table. Okay, I want you to see me. I'm gonna bring that. We're gonna see that up, but I'm gonna get into that. I want you to understand what was actually on the table. The discussion was about how they could legitimately put freed men back into a particular institution of slavery, and that is where they came up with all these black codes. Remember, we talked about that before, black codes. They came up with all the curfews, and my co-host even specifically said to you about vagrancy laws, the vagrancy laws of Jim Crow. Remember they did that? And there was a significance to the line, except as punishment for a crime where the party shall have been duly convicted. And that line created a legal loophole in America that's used to exploit freed men. Okay, that loophole in the 13th Amendment only transformed slavery instead of abolishing it. And though it sounds like a theory, it's undeniable because of the following facts. After the Civil War, the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution triggered our country's first prison boom. Now, I hate statistics, okay, because the way we use them fits all these biased narratives, okay? So I try not to use those. I just address them and I try to move forward. But I hate statistics. And I think I only hate statistics because, like I said, the method that they're applied and assessed, okay? Usually it's assessed in a very superficial way, all right? And that's because usually, it's assessed with an influence that's influenced by cognitive bias, all right? But in that case, you can't misconstrue the fact that the number of arrested and incarcerated Black African Americans surged. Okay. Passing of the 13th Amendment surged the country's first prison boom. You can Google that. That's easy. That's find that. All right. And then the other statistic is that the number of arrested and incarcerated Black African Americans surged. And it surged so much that the penal code enforcers used this issue as an opportunity to support former slave owners through the convict leasing system. And I know you should know about this because Quentin was trying to tell you that, or Cage was trying to tell you that, okay? Convict leasing system was a system which the southern states leased their prisoners to private railways. They leased them to mines like, let's say maybe gold mines, but, we don't have any diamond mines here. Whatever, we had gold mines and coal mines, okay? And then also large plantations. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, think about it. We're not only the slave owners were they given reparations for losing, slaves because of the Emancipation Proclamation, because of the results of the Civil War, because they lost the whole Civil War, but they were rewarded through the criminalization of freed men also. So they got a little bit of money, and some of them got some slaves back. Now, by criminalizing African Americans, the former slave owners would only create a drastic impact upon the labor market. How? Well, we were actually going to go into detail about that, and show you examples of that, a whole year ago. Okay, we were going to do that when we talked about the conducting of the Irish diaspora presentation that we, have been sitting in the ether now for about a year. Okay, this convict leasing system, though. Someone trying to get on. Might have issues with it on YouTube. So I'll probably share it. All right, where was I? Yeah, we were going to have that conversation about how it impacted the labor market, because we were going to show you that in a presentation with the Irish diaspora. We were moving to that, okay? This is why it was so important for us to have that conversation when we got to the criminality, okay? Because I got to address some narratives along the way about Black people being lazy and how that's a negative and false narrative. So I gotta address that. So that's why we're going to have the Irish diaspora discussion, and it's a two-part discussion. May actually turn the longer, just depends. But we want to talk about the idea of competition between African Americans and Irish, and you see it all the time. You just don't recognize it, so we'll start calling out so you can see it. But convict leasing system, along with other issues, help to create competition, and that competition further agitated the relationship between European Americans who were struggling to secure gainful employment and Black African Americans who were being exploited by peonage. Okay, it's another word. Look it up. Easy, P-E-O-N-A-G-E. Peonage. If you take a real good look at the image there to my left, though, you will see a timeline. All right. Matter of fact, I'm gonna give it to you large. Okay. Important for you to understand this. All right. Let me get this convict leasing system off of there just for a moment, because I want you to see this. Take a real good look at the image, everybody, especially you, Link. I want you to see this. Okay. Take a real good image. Look at that image. And you will see a timeline there, right? Well, it's the only thing you see right now. So you're seeing that timeline because on multiple occasions, my co-host and I have tried to explain a very simple concept that history is linear, that we're constantly moving forward, not backwards in time. We're not freezing time. We can't jump ahead to a time as far as what we've been exposed to in this life. But you see here in this timeline showing a color code as well as some identifying labels that's meant to give clarity. Can you observe the red font there in association to the same color of the timeline where the red it runs up until the 1865 year line? You see that? that's to signify that the chattel slavery ran up until that year. And that's associated to, you know, the reading of the Emancipation Proclamation, or Juneteenth, right? From there, you can see the color changes to an orange hue, okay? An orange color. That orange hue is the time that the convict leasing system functioned in America, in American society. And if you see, it extends to just before 1937. And I'm finding information that says that it was even in the 1940s, okay? So 37 is being lenient, okay? But it ran up into the 1940s. Someone stated it ran up until Truman had tried to integrate the United States Army. And there's probably some information about that, because I think there is something. I think I've been told by an older African-American gentleman before, is that some people looked at this as an opportunity to either they were forced to either integrate, go into the military, or suffer in jail, or what was known as the chain gang. This is where the chain gang came into play too. Okay, right along with this convict leasing. All right, now the chain gang was a resolution to the problem of releasing 4 million Black African-American former slaves, now called freedmen. So they, you know, had a way to convict leasing and the chain gang were ways where they were all like systems that were implemented to solve that problem of how do we, you know, we don't have any prisons to house 4 million slaves. Okay, so it was like we can just lock them up, put them right back on the plantation. Okay, and we'll cover that in another live. I'll probably do another one tomorrow, depending on I don't want to run across anybody else's. There's a lot of information here, but it's important for you to understand and know, because you seem to have missed this. This is what's being said, and why don't you should celebrate December 6th instead of Juneteenth. All this information is there. You see all that? Convict leasing system estimated to be at 93 years. Chattel slavery, 246 years, approximately 246 years. Because we never talk about anything before the 1600s. We never talk about the 1500s. We don't talk about that. And we sure enough don't talk about the 1400s, because then we have to talk about the Moors. And believe you me, we'll go there someday soon. All right? But we're going to cover this chain gang, going back to the chain gang. We're going to cover that a little bit later, because that's going to be specifically relevant to us, because here in Brevard County, we have a sheriff that has implemented the chain gang, and that's giving you a heads up of what's coming. All right? There's details about it. We'll cover that later. But this is some of the earliest, you know, some of the earliest documentation of the convict leasing system is showing it is as early as 1840 up until just before America came involved with World War II, right around 1940. Okay, so close to 100 years. That's where some people have mentioned, but you know, not highly discussed in existence. They haven't highly discussed the existence of the convicted white men and white women in that program, which I don't even know if there were any white women in that program. So if you do know about that, teach me something. Okay, but it's time, you know, that time that the convict leasing system existed is estimated at 93 years, as you can see from the image, right? And I found that interesting because at the same time, it is being synonymous with the Reconstruction era, also known as the Jim Crow era, which also consisted of about the same time of 99 years. So we can go back and look at American legacy of slavery timeline and see the similarities. And I'm confident in this estimation of 93 years, it just wasn't a coincidence. All right. So to show you proof, I'm not going to just tell you, I'll show you. I'll show you. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. It goes a little earlier, beyond 1619, goes back to 1518, which is the signing of the Treaty of Tordesillas, and we don't even cover the Papal Bull yet. But those were documents that they used to make excuses so that they could conduct the transatlantic slave trade and chattel slavery in America. Okay. But look at that. See the yellow right there? That's segregation. That's the Jim Crow era. 99 years from 1865, from the reading of the Emancipation Proclamation till about 1964, there was segregation, right? 99 years. 99 years. And only 93 dealing with the convict leasing system. So you can kind of see how the criminalization actually impacted our country, right? I acknowledge that there are strides that have been made in the early 1940s, such as Truman's integration of the military, being a military soldier. I understand that. Okay, I know that. Or former soldier. I don't know how you look at it, because once a soldier, you're supposed to always be a soldier. So, given the adage, service to the nation brought opportunities for the social status of Black African Americans, and it offered that opportunities. It offered that environment, or that climate of America to change. Now, the U.S. Constitution passed the Three Prisons Act. All right, get that on here, because we're talking about laws that they use to solve their problems, which is, we're going to define this problem as a Negro problem, and you'll see that as we move forward, right? Now, the U.S. Congress passed the Three Prisons Acts, and that established the United States federal prison system within in the year of 1891. All right. These were the three prisons that they introduced. Sorry, I won't be redundant. Congress passed the Three Prisons Act, and that established the United States federal prison system. Now, it's very controversial information, because there's a lot of information out there about the first prison, the worst prison, etc. Okay, something that I would welcome someone to come in, and if you know the information, the actual details of why they define that as a prison, etc., etc., etc. But this is basically to be passed as the United States federal prison system. And before I jump the gun any further, I just wanted to know it's important to talk about this, because especially all my military compatriots, they always talk about Leavenworth. They say it's like one of the worst prisons or whatever, or the worst prison, I guess, that a military soldier can go to. I can think of other ones, but they say Leavenworth is a very bad one. So that's a very popular one for those individuals to talk about. But Atlanta State Prison, McNeil Island, and Leavenworth, I guess they were the first three prisons, and that was a direct result of the Three Prisons Act. Okay, now I'm about to finish this up. I'm going to show this last one. It's going to get very intense, and this is actually going to talk about something that I find to be extremely, extremely important. Okay, and this is going to deal with a bit of ideology. We got to talk about this. I was trying to avoid it at some point, because it's so much more of a conversation, but I just wanted to just prove this, or just to show this, okay, because this is a very controversial idea. All right, now you saw there on Link's response, okay, to me. Since you failed to remain objective, Link, in regard to the quality of information available to us on this platform, and you consider it of the ability of our viewing audience to be able to comprehend the significance of that information that's being presented to them, I had to ask you a series of questions earlier that only arrives at when they are practicing a very rational approach to critical thinking. Okay, if you're not familiar with white supremacy and the nature of what it truly is, you would understand that 6 of the last 11 questions that I asked you, Link, they get right at the heart of what white supremacy is. But if you just hop into the conversation and you don't understand the environment, and you don't understand the context of why we're using a particular method of delivery and distribution of all this information, you set yourself up for failure, man. So please pay attention to what I'm about to show you, okay? Did y'all see that? Y'all saw the comments. I might bring it back up. I'm about to close this out because this is enough for the night. I got some stuff we got to do. I got some stuff I need to take care of. It's already running late. You see, you need to understand that when you actually enter into a Black space with resolutions to problems, you need to really seriously think about the resolutions. And I really don't believe that you would come up with something effective and anything yielding that tangible benefits. But I do at least expect you to invite yourself. I expect you to invite yourself to the table to objectively have a conversation about race, and you have to come with some form of humility. Okay, at least come with some objectivity. You have to be relevant when you speak on an issue as sensitive as race. And for once in your life, because I know you're not subtle about this. Okay, I have evidence for it. Okay, but for once in your life, you need to make sure that you bring some depth when you come to these conversations about race, especially when you come in a Black, in a Black space. You don't have to do it in other spaces, I guess, but I know that when you come into a Black space, you don't do like Michael Newman, go to the college or whatever, and then come up with superficial stuff, because these kids understand this stuff. These youth understand this stuff. The adults, sometimes the older people, they don't talk about it. They'll be quiet about it. They'll shy away from it. They won't, I call that the bow tie community, always trying to be politically, not politically correct, but always trying to play the respectability politics, something we talked about previously too. But you have to come with some depth, especially if you come with me and my co-hosts. All right, I'm not saying we know everything, but don't insult us, because for some reason you go with the negative trope that African Americans aren't as intelligent as as white Americans, because I know that trope is out there. We talk about the chat rooms and stuff where they spew these negative narratives. Okay, but you can't believe that, man. You can't. That's a bunch of pseudo philosophy. Okay, but I'm telling you, not only to come with some depth, but I'm telling you that because you got to take a look at what you said, earlier at that comment over there, or the comment over there, excuse me, it's inverted. You try to categorize information that we shared to a did you know, trying to trivialize it, like I talked about the last live stream. You try to trivialize it, which is dismissing and diminishing, and you're trying to be insulting, about as insulting as Piers Morgan. All right. Now that was insulting how you blatantly try to trivialize our Black history, and then in the same breath you try to tell us how we should celebrate, what should be significant to us. Now what was it that you said? Take a look at it. What you said. You said that I'd be hard pressed to find a kook at a KKK rally that believes these things are valid, much less the standard. When we're talking about drapetomania, we're talking about pseudoscience, we're talking about pseudo philosophic beliefs that we are inferior, Black inferiority. We talked about that one of the very first shows on this platform. But members of the viewing audience, I want y'all to understand what you're seeing when he said that I'd be hard pressed to find a kook at a KKK rally believes in white supremacist pseudo philosophy or things like phrenology. It's him really simply making a defense via diminishing the legitimacy of the threat of white supremacy. Okay, this is often a method that's used by a lot of racist people and people who only claim to have an implicit bias, or only claim, others have said they only have an implicit bias, but they be practicing full-blown racism. Which makes perfect sense why Link would get triggered when we share Afrocentric perspectives on this platform, and then he accused us of being Black supremacists. But I've never been hard pressed to find kooks and racist sympathizers at a KKK rally. I mean, it's clear I don't attend them, right? You know that. But all I have to do is mind my own dang on business here in Brevard County, right? Like when I was on a moving job, you know, and a Karen in Cocoa Beach ran up to my car, had her little doggy in her arm, and she was threatening me and my black coworker, telling us that we didn't belong there. Meanwhile, she didn't do that to the two white women coworkers that, you know, we had that were with us. And they were in front of our, you know, we had a convoy, about 4 cars, three or 4 cars. Okay. Yeah, it was 4 cars. All right. She didn't do that to the 2 white women in the convoy. In fact, I can tell you, she even looked at the white women in the front and she said, "Are they with you?" Because I told her we were there. And then the white girl turns and says, "Yeah, they're with me." And then all of a sudden, then she went to apologize. "Oh, I'm sorry. I just thought, oh, you thought we were the spring breakers. We were spring breakers. You see all these black people going to the spring break, to the beach over there. And you want to, you know, look at us or whatever. You don't belong here." Just ran up to the car or whatever, not understanding that I was there for a job. I had legitimate business of being there. Yeah, everybody. I got hit with a Karen one day. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. It was at the Pier Resort Condos Associates, located on the corner of Winslow Avenue and Ocean Beach Boulevard. I gave you the address specifically so you can look it up and see what area it's in. Yeah, they got some Karens over there. Okay. Or like a nosy Ken, nosy white guy who started video recording me as I was delivering furniture to a house over there on Cap Rosa Circle, right there in Melbourne, right off of the Pineda Causeway. So you got to ask yourself, you see, you know, these people go into a house, and I mean, come on, who breaks into a house and delivers furniture? How the heck does that look suspicious? My bad, my bad. I keep forgetting. When you're black and in that kind of neighborhood, I guess that's enough to make you appear suspicious. So I ain't got to find no kook at the KKK rally. No, Link. But if you want an example of a kook, okay? I don't necessarily agree with the word or whatever, but this is what you said, right? If you want me to find an example of a kook that believes in a pseudo philosophy, I'm gonna show you one.
Why don't you go back? If you love your country, why are you coming over here chasing dollars? If you
I go back all the time.
I hear all y'all people say, scream, we do the jobs, nobody wants. We have nothing here in America. Y'all keep flooding it. But like God said, Yahweh himself says, we will chase you out of here, and it's going to be a thorn.
Are you going to chase me out of here?
No, we're going to burn you out.
Are you going to burn me out? How are you going to do it? How are you going to do with 11 million immigrants?
Don't matter. Hey, we killed 6 million Jews the last time.
How are you?
11 million
You're
is
telling
nothing.
me that you're going to burn me?
Yeah.
No.
You're sitting on my property now.
Yes, it is your property.
Yeah.
And I do understand that I'm probably the first black person immigrant here in your property.
Well, first off, you said you're Cuban. Or whatever. To me, you're a nigger. That's it.
Watch your mouth.
That's it to me.
I find that offensive, and I don't think you need to go that, because my skin color doesn't define me.
I am a white woman who grew up in an evangelical culty religion. As I educate myself, though, I really get stuck on this one point. White Christians would go to church on a Sunday wearing a cross around their neck to worship a martyr God who was crucified by being nailed to a cross, to be publicly tortured to death for political reasons. And then those same Christians would leave church with a picnic to go to a public lynching, and then they would gather by the hundreds or thousands to do to a black person the same or worse than was done to their martyr God. And then they would pass out the body parts as souvenirs, and they would take photographs to go on postcards. And they would bring their kids and call themselves, without irony, Christians. What the actual fuck?
Sorry for the language, everybody. But until I obtain I need some more memory on my laptop so I can be able to use the function to edit some of that stuff out. But you need to hear it, okay? What we were talking about there is some religious conflictions of white supremacy. Now, I know that video clip was intense, and it raises the eyebrow in regard to the pseudo philosophies that white nationalists hold on to. Now, that individual's name was Chris Barker, and as you can see, his ideology was indeed surprising. Mr. Barker is the Grand Wizard of the loyal White Knights faction of the KKK, and his philosophy, sorry, I put my hands in front of my face, but his philosophy was formed on the belief that immigrants pose a threat to his ability to be able to retain wealth in America. And you heard that. All right, Mr. Barker asked the Univision news anchor, I think her name is Ilia Calderon. He asked, why doesn't she go back to her country of origin? And then she quickly responds, I do all the time. And then he replies, we have nothing here in America. Y'all keep flooding it. Then he said something that makes my point. But like God says, like Yahweh himself says, we will chase you out of here. Mr. Barker corrected himself, telling Miss Calderon, no, we're going to burn you out. To not chase you out, burn you out. So this is significance to the burning cross, but we'll discuss that at a different time. But you heard me say, we'll burn you out, right? Now, gotta ask this question, this confliction, because there's I know a lot of religious people are probably, I know a lot of religious people don't like me. I know that because I don't sugarfoot around stuff. I want to ask the question I'm gonna be like, yes, you, and I'm gonna ask you the question right up front. How can he worship Yahweh and through Yahweh advocate for the killing of immigrants? Just one question. Here's another one. What kind of ideology has him confidently identifying God by Hebrew name, okay, while simultaneously bragging about identifying with Nazis who slaughtered 6 million Jews? And then he identified, when you saw, he said we. He said we slaughtered 6 million Jews. Pseudo philosophy, a kook, crazy. See what I'm saying, Link? And then you say that I'd be hard pressed to find that kook at a KKK rally who holds those same beliefs, right? Bro, you missed it. You clearly missed it. And for an educator, you should be ashamed of yourself. Now, this ain't a shaming session. I'm just telling you, for an educator, for you not to understand this, you should be ashamed of yourself. Now, look at what he said to Ilya. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. But look at what he said to her. He said, to me, you're an N-word. You can downplay that all you like, especially all my Latino community members. Downplay it all you like. But there are many who share his ideals. And that's how they see you. When it comes down to it, the elimination of African Americans, that's what's coming for you. They're picking and choosing. And right now they see us as the biggest threat. So that's why you see a lot of anti-Black racism. And then they come for every other person of color. Pay attention. All my Jesus freaks out there, pay attention. Just pray to Jesus and it all end. He's praying to Jesus too. He's praying to Yahweh too. And you say, Link, that I'd be hard pressed to find a kook who holds those beliefs. Remember the last year when those, I'm not supposed to say the name Nazi, but I'll just say Yahtzee from here on out. So remember when those Yahtzee sympathizers, they showed up on the overpass of I-95 over here in Brevard, and then they were all showing signs, whatever, talking about Kyle Rittenhouse, et cetera, and how Jews needed to die. Remember they were saying all of that on site with the sign? And a bunch of y'all were surprised. Hard pressed my behind, Link. You'd be hard pressed to get your head out of your butt. Don't worry. Others can continue, doing the thinking for you. Okay. But aside from that first clip that we just saw, you saw authentically ADHD me at TikTok. She came with a mental impasse. She came to a point of mental impasse when she was trying to figure out white supremacy. She was saying, where most people just melt from confliction,
she was actually trying to attempt to rationalize the thoughts of how white supremacist behavior was and how it was in contradiction to how they even identify. But I want to share with you a conversation that I just had last week, about white supremacist behavior. I was informed through someone else who had been doing some research. We just talked about this earlier, that I came across the idea that when it comes to white supremacists, white men who are white supremacists, they subscribe to that. They're most likely searching for this positive male identity. Okay. And it's just for the white males. We haven't had a discussion about white females, but you know, for white males, they're searching for a positive male identity. I don't think that every one of us are doing that. We're searching for that positive identity. That is the whole point of Jesus, right? So that made me think of a lot of things when we were talking about that. None that I would say is a justifiable excuse, but I do understand a little more why, you know, the Renaissance was important and why they felt that their traditional way of life, or which is basically living free and kind of overtly racist, or not kind of overtly, but just straight up overtly racist. I can kind of see why they think that traditional way of life is being threatened. And I understood it because I saw it from a different, you know, perspective, especially being in the United States Army. So why white men feel that the image of white Jesus must be conserved, and why blackface or why a blackface like Barack Obama resting in a place of power like the White House, why it triggered them. And we've seen that in the past. All right. But it's just some healthy speculation there. All right. But after all the assumptions and the minimizing of the important nuances regarding the Emancipation Day celebrations, you prove to us, Link, that you just don't understand, even though you've taken a hard stance against Juneteenth and any celebrations that were associated with it. Okay. You said that. All right. You said that. There it is. Your assumption is in red. Your assumptions that you make are in red. Okay. You assume that I missed December 6th. I didn't miss it, you know, like I missed it. It was intentionally left out because of this whole 2 hours almost alive of just information. Because I didn't go into that because it wasn't relevant. Okay. We don't have the relevant discussions. Right. And then there in your yellow, you identify that you miseducate the youth about the significance of the 13th Amendment. And then you even miseducate the parents. And this is another thing. Black African-American parents here in Brevard County, do not let some teacher or whatever who's just sitting in and using this position to just try to tell you, oh, this is what you should do. Let them state the facts. But then you actually communicate back to them. You let them know, hey, listen, we don't celebrate the 13th Amendment because of the social issues that are going on in America right now. There are a lot of people who believe, you only got to say that it is a fact, just say there's a lot of people who believe that this led up to the criminalization of African Americans today. And then leave it there. Let him do the research and find out about the prison boom. Let him do the research and figure it out. He's the educator. So don't let him just, you know, him and people like him or whatever, just tell you how to think and feel. Little joke there, you get it. But I hope that you don't have any Black students in your class, Link, because I'm telling you right now, you are truly setting them up for mental health needs. All right, that's not an exaggeration, because right there in the red highlighted section, you admitted to assuming that we missed December 6th because, you know, we had made a mistake. No, Link, we know the 13th Amendment and what it truly means. Even because of privilege, you were lost in understanding the nuance of the 13th Amendment. And if you truly objectively spoken to Black people about the 13th Amendment, instead of hard down trying to always be right, you would know the documentary entitled 13th, okay? You would know the document entitled 13th. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to have that on there. But this is the last thing I'm going to show, and then we're going to conclude tonight because I just want to make my points to round out this discussion. That's a documentary that you all can go check out right now. 13th. Take a real good look at the photo, Link. Since you work with kids, you should understand this, because I don't want, you know, anyone of you also think I'm just being a bully right now. I'm just using this opportunity to objectively educate you, Link Price,
and use this moment to just, you know, not just have fun bashing you, but I'm just using this moment. And I want you to take a look at this photo and understand exactly why it was hard for me to comprehend how you didn't even get it. See, all you have to do is Google and click in the search bar. All you do is type 13th and then once, or 13th Amendment, but when you stop at 13th, this image will come up. This link will come up, and you'll see the image come up, whatever with the results, and that's it with the first page of results. Okay. Look at the photo, man. Like kids use art. Look at the photo. In terms of artistic expression, the images that you see there, minus some of the words that accompany it on the original illustration, like Netflix, directed by Ava DuVernay, nominated for Academy Award, Best Documentary. The words at the top left say, from slave, in red it's saying it, from slave to criminal in one amendment. Even if you didn't get it by seeing the big red 13th there on the slide right there, on the image, on the right there. Even if you didn't, you know, you seen that 13th, you can still read from slave to criminal in one amendment and get that the 13th Amendment criminalized our community. Even if you still suffer from that very acute mental lethargy that you seem to, you know, was practicing or whatever with me and my co-host, you can still see the American flag with a person walking away from it in chains. Excuse me, my bad, not chains, shackles on his feet. Because that image, which is a scrubbed image, but that image communicates to you why the Black community doesn't celebrate December 6th, 1865 link. It shows you why we don't, you know, some image shows you that we don't celebrate December 6th as some sort of regulatory legislative masterpiece that we all should annually honor. Oh my goodness, this is so powerful of a day. Now, with that all being said, I hope that everybody sees how microaggressive Link came off when he came into the 13th, when he came into the space talking about the 13th Amendment. You could look at art and see it, man. The 13th is a documentary. Let me put it back up so y'all can see it. The 13th is a documentary that was produced by Netflix, Can Do Films, and the Forward Movement. It is directed by Ava DuVernay, and I don't think that she's very popular in the Black community. If I have to annotate the reason why, it would be because she acquiesced to the mainstream in failing to call out Harvey Weinstein. We're not going to talk about Harvey Weinstein, okay? But the documentary was nominated for Best Documentary Academy Award, for which, you know, you can catch this on YouTube, all right? That's where I saw it the first time. But you can go to Netflix, where it's featured, and you'll be able to see it. Okay, you can already. I think I tried to show you a clip. I don't have it. I'll find it next week, or actually tomorrow. But there's a clip, a documentary, and I don't like to show these clips because sometimes they always hit you with these copyright issues on Facebook algorithms. But I'm trying to minimize the videos that you know that are organic to this platform. But after watching the documentary, you'll understand just how significant in terms of culturally celebrating the 13th Amendment is. You'll understand that. And just watching it, you know, isn't going to be sufficient enough for you. But it will be sufficient enough for you to start having a conversation about the documentary. You know, when you visit the water cooler or whatnot, and you talk about how, you know, how disrespectful I was trying to reach out to you about this since you came over into our Black space. But you need to sit down with your Black friends, Link. You need to sit down in a neutralized place, not in work, in a neutralized place where they can say and talk to you without being offended, and then you not running back and saying, telling your boss, "Oh, he offended me," and be like the little kid or whatever that caused the Eastern Florida State to not have their classes, their American government class, because he was uncomfortable with the study of talk about the civil rights movement. Because almost every white person that joins these sensitive racial conversations always attempts to use the tokenized Black person that they have in proximity just to gain the benefit of the doubt. And you can't do that here. You can't do that here, buddy. Like I said, you better come with some depth when you come with come on this platform at me and my co-host. So I'm sorry this went over 2 hours. I didn't intend none of that, but you know, most of the information, whatever, is very important. We have to always talk about this stuff because we get individuals that try to be real slick about it and make little comments, whatever, when we're trying to have an actual community conversation or a conversation actually where we'll talk about the issues and not be like have these people sitting on the city council or whatnot that's afraid to actually talk about the issues. We're going to get right to the heart of it. We're going to address it because we need to talk about this stuff because we need to know when we make these solutions or whatnot, they keep throwing out these antiquated solutions. Now, I saw a group that was trying to actually promote Black business, and that was great. But the problem with that is we have to get Black people to start owning Black businesses, which means you're going to have to get into the schools and you're going to have to show and start giving them an opportunity to be able to, you know, to become an entrepreneur. All right. And with that being said, I want to go ahead and share the fact that, you know, there's the career fair that's at Melbourne High. And I'm not sure when a career fair is going to be at the other schools, the other high schools, but if you have that information, share that information. But this is an opportunity for all the Black African Americans in business owners in Brevard County to go ahead and see if you can call these individuals and I'll give you the information, the name of a lady you can call so that you can get in there and for Melbourne High School, you got to call Miss Kelly Persian. And there's a number, there's the extension, there's the email. Go and email it, maybe a little bit late. I'm sorry, I apologize for getting this information out to you late, but there's a lot of stuff that goes on. And I just wanted to be able to show you this. That's how you do this. You start the opportunity there at those kids. You get those kids businesses. Someone else did that. They actually gave kids an LLC. They were handing out a bunch of LLCs to kids or whatnot. And that's the step you take before you promote the Black business. Then you do that. Then you get the Black businesses where they, you know, merge together and they start talking and start communicating. And I wasn't able to say this at that time when I was a part of that group or whatever that was talking about it, because it's kind of hard to jump in the middle of a room of people who've already been assembled before you when I wasn't there at the beginning of it. But it's kind of hard to jump in and tell them, hey, no, that ain't gonna work. Before we do that, we got to do this. And then, you know, me taking the leadership and saying that is very difficult. And that's why we produce this forum, so we can actually talk about tangible solutions. And that's a tangible solution. We need Black business owners to go to the schools or whatnot, just like the military is going to be contacting. My son received a letter from the Marines, an advertisement from the Marines and a couple other colleges in the area. But before we do this, you know, recruiting them into the military and all sort of stuff, it should be the same way for Black businesses. We need to recruit some of these African-American kids or whatever into understanding what is business and entrepreneurship, get them there. And then once you do that, then you do the movement like, you know, like the other organization was talking about, where we're doing like a, you know, a mentorship program. That's how that's supposed to work. And I apologize for how long this went. I'll show this information again. It'll probably be irrelevant at the time, but you know, I'm just saying that's a solution. So I ended off with a solution. So you're not just thinking I'm just bashing old buddy over there. I just wanted to be able to show that that's one of the tangible solutions that we need to get to. I appreciate the fact that, you know, I had some people participate and that there are some people actually not in the room, but watching, because I got a few messages. I'm sorry I got that link to you late. You know who I'm talking to. But my intent was to just basically respond and get out this information, because yes, African Americans here in Brevard County, you need to understand that why we don't celebrate the 13th Amendment. If you didn't know, if you do know, whatever, tell those individuals, because what they're doing is they're commandeering the conversation and they're stopping things. So you see what Ron DeSantis is doing. They're capping our ability to be able to learn, our ability to be able to grow, and it's not fair. It's not right. Not only do they sit and ride on the narrative that Black people aren't as intelligent as white people, or whatever, but then they perpetuate the myth of that myth. They perpetuate that not only with American exceptionalism, but they perpetuate that myth with their behavior in legislating what is or what can't be taught without discussing the context of what is taught. And we'll talk about that. We'll probably do it tomorrow. I'll probably do another live stream tomorrow. I won't do it on Thursday because I don't want to interrupt the 40+ podcast. Elgin, some of the issues you talk about crazy, but I do support you as another African American here in Brevard County. You always see me support you, man. And as always, I thank you all for participating. I thank you for viewing and for your comments throughout this week. I am tired. I've been working hard. Got a lot of stuff going on. You see, it's already after 10, and I'm still up doing this. So I know your concerns for me, whatever, and I do. I'm appreciative of your concerns. I worked through it. I got some things. I was doing a little bit worse off. I had some back issues, and I've been doing pretty good now. So other than that, I just wanted to say thank you for your kind words, or the fact that you even would call up and check on me, because there are some people that don't do that, but will say they support you or whatever. So as always, I wish you love. I wish you all peace, and may the Most High guide your path.